Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. 9-year-old girl abducted in Bath. Centon Hospital recording decline in COVID-19 hospitalizations. In sports, 5 youth players included in Jamaica Rugby 7 squad for America's Championship this weekend. I'm Giovanni Dennis and here are the details. A frantic search is continuing for 9-year-old Felicia Prussia, who was abducted from her home in Bath, St. Thomas yesterday evening. Felicia is of brown complexion, slim built, and 4 feet 6 inches tall. She was last seen wearing a white blouse and blue shorts. Head of the Jamaica Constabulary Forces Corporate Communications Unit, Senior Superintendent Stephanie Lindsay, told our news center that closed-circuit television captured the child walking with a man in the community sometime after 7 o'clock.
Her mother reportedly ran to the station and said that her daughter was at home and she searched and she can't find her. So they commenced a search with the police along with other members of the community, which is a large community. They searched all night. She wasn't found. Their new team went out of South this morning, so they are still searching for her. Based on the discussion we had, he's known in the community. He's originally from Portland, but he was charged for illegal possession of firearms and was reporting in Bath on part of the condition of his bail. So it is alleged that he was on the footage with the girl just around the time when she went missing. So we are asking persons that if they have any bit of information to share with the police at Bath or 119 or the nearest police station for that matter.
SSP Lindsay says shortly before abducting the little girl, the man reportedly held up another woman at her home with a knife. He cut her and ran when her spouse intervened. Now, while the woman was reporting the incident at the Bath police station, Felicia's mother turned up and said she was missing. The private sector organization of Jamaica, PSOJ, says the island's vaccination efforts should not be politicized. The call comes following the declaration by the opposition that it is against vaccination mandates. The PSOJ says without a unified approach, the social and economic recovery of the island could be in jeopardy. O'Shane Masters reports.
The PSOJ says with less than 20% of the country fully or partially vaccinated, Jamaica's COVID-19 vaccination program has underperformed. It says the prospects of the island reaching its target of having 65% of the population inoculated by March 2022 against COVID-19 is also waning. The private sector body noted that with 54% of the population indicating they are not willing to take the vaccine at this time, the government, private sector, and civil society are grappling with how, if and when a mandate should be introduced. It's therefore calling for the opposition and the government to jointly determine and inform the country of a common position on a national COVID-19 vaccine policy. As for public sector workers, the PSOJ says the government must begin the introduction of vaccine workplace policies to keep its workforce and the general public which it serves as safe as possible. O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.
The St. Anne's Bay Hospital is reporting a reduction in COVID-19 admissions at the health facility. Chief Executive Officer Dennis Morgan told TVJ News that there are several contributing factors. Shamila Pullen reports.
A month ago, the St. Anne's Bay Hospital was seeing up to 200 COVID-19 cases. Now it's down to 48 persons being treated for the virus at the facility. And although the pandemic is not yet over, health officials see this as a positive sign.
We were averaging over a month ago about 12 to 14 admissions per day. Happy to report that we are about 6 to 7 admissions per day in terms of COVID. And so you can imagine how relief my staff, how they are in terms of that they're doing a good job in terms of managing our COVID cases.
Chief Executive Officer for the hospital, Dennis Morgan, says the reduction is due to several factors, including the fact that persons being admitted are not as critical as others who came in before.
Possibly two of the contributing factors why we're seeing our numbers down is one, because it seems more persons are being vaccinated. So that tells you that vaccination works in terms of reducing your chance of being hospitalized, and the no movement days. As she explained to me in terms of the no movement days, person that might have the virus, the no movement day has stopped them from going out and infecting others, and then you'd have a domino effect. So the no movement days are working.
Mr. Morgan says this will now free up bed space at the facility to ensure more persons with other medical conditions can get treatment.
We're looking now at our wards that we would have used as COVID beds to now put them back into general circulation, because as you know, COVID is not the only thing that is happening in the health system. We have persons who are sick and need to be seen and be treated at a hospital. So we are going to step down between this weekend and next week 2 of the COVID wards, and thereby freeing up about 22 to about 30 beds, so that we can now start the process of seeing and possibly admitting persons who are non-COVID cases.
And should the country experience a fourth wave of the virus, Mr. Morgan says the hospital would be ready. Shamela Pullen, TVJ News.
And the Health Ministry is again urging Jamaicans to get vaccinated. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Jacqueline Besesa McKenzie says this is especially important as the Christmas season approaches. O'Shane Masters has more.
The government is on a drive to have at least 1 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine in the arms of Jamaicans by November. But vaccine hesitancy is still a concern. In a recent RGR Gleaner Don Anderson poll, 34% of respondents said they either had not taken or would not take the vaccine, roughly a third of the respondents. Speaking at the latest COVID-19 conversation on Thursday, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Jacqueline Besesa McKenzie says most Jamaicans are still unvaccinated. This, she notes, is of great concern.
12.3% of the population is now fully vaccinated, and further 8.2% have had 1 dose, so they're due to get their 2nd dose. We need to move these numbers up.
If you take the 65% of the population that we had targeted when we started, the numbers are 27% of persons of that 65% number who have had at least a single dose, and 17% who have a double dose. If you take the entire population, then clearly you're low.
Meanwhile, the CMO says that there's hope following a high take-up of the vaccines by senior citizens.
I'm very pleased to see that the 70 to 79 age group and the 60 to 69 age group, we are seeing just about almost 40% of those age groups having had at least 1 dose of vaccine. 27.7% in the 70 to 79 age group are fully vaccinated, and a further 11.5% are to get a 2nd dose.
And yet another appeal to those persons who are due their 2nd dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine.
And what we're seeing is that we have a significant number of persons who would have received the AstraZeneca. 120,000 persons received, just over 120,000 persons received the AstraZeneca in the month of August. And so far, so they would be due their 2nd dose of vaccine now starting in October. And just about 40,000 persons have received their 2nd dose. So we have another 80,000 persons who are due their 2nd doses. Some of these are elderly persons here. They need to ensure that they get their 2nd dose of vaccines. This is the only way that you are going to protect yourself in the upcoming Christmas season.
In the meantime, Dr. Besesa McKenzie is urging pregnant women to take the COVID-19 vaccine. She says data from all the manufacturers of the vaccines show they are safe for expectant mothers.
Here we are seeing very clearly that the number of women who are pregnant the number is increasing for those that are pregnant that have COVID and severe COVID. And so you're more likely to have a severe outcome if you're pregnant, and it can also affect the baby. So therefore, I'm asking you, I'm pleading with you, go and get vaccinated.
13 people died from COVID-19 between September 14 and October 13. This has increased the death toll to 2,072. According to the Ministry of Health, 4 deaths are under investigation. 393 people have been hospitalized with the respiratory illness. 24 patients are critically ill and 40 are severely ill. 187 additional people have recovered from the virus, pushing the recovery count to 55,082. There are 29,232 active cases on the island. 264 new COVID-19 cases were recorded on Thursday from 1,282 samples. The overall case count now stands at 86,986. The positivity rate is 20.1%. And it's now time for a break here on the Midday News, but please stay with us. We'll have much more when you return. Welcome back. We're continuing the news. The Caribbean Examinations Council, CXC, says it's working to boost electronic testing as part of efforts to improve digital transformation in the region. Sandy Williams reports.
The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the need for an electronic testing modality for external examinations in the Caribbean. It's why Director of Operations at the Caribbean Examination Council, CXC, Dr. Nicole Manning, says the regional body is working to boost the modality. She explains that the move is also part of the Council's 2025 strategic plan. Dr. Manning says for this year's sitting of the June-July exams, there was an increase in the use of electronic testing.
We saw an increase in usage of this facility for CAPE by 27% and for CSEC by as much as 84%, and this is very good. For the CCSLC, however, we saw a reduction in the utilization of this modality by 21%.
However, she admits there were weaknesses in this modality.
Challenges that were experienced with internet access, power outages, and of the incorrect version of the secure browser. However, CXC worked with the centers and no candidate would have been affected negatively.
Dr. Manning explains that electronic testing is one of 7 components in digital transformation for the region. It's why CXC has ramped up training for the management of electronic testing among ministry officials and chief invigilators.
What would have been different this year is in the past, we would have had a dedicated period for the training of ministry officials, center administrators, and chief invigilators for the management of electronic testing. For the first time this year, given the increased utilization indication by the territories in wanting to use electronic testing, that modality, we actually responded to centers even at very, very short notice.
Despite the availability of electronic testing, Dr. Manning says CAPE recorded the highest level of absenteeism in the last 4 years. Approximately 8.3% of students did not turn up for exams in June and July this year. In 2020, just under 4% of students were absent. Sandy Williams, TVJ News.
Renewed calls this afternoon for better rehabilitation programs for convicted criminals. It follows the killing of reputed gangster Christopher Dogpaw Linton by the St. Andrew Police on Monday. Herman Green reports.
Some argue that Jamaica needs to do more to prevent convicts from influencing crimes from behind bars. Minister of National Security, Dr. Horace Chang, believes some criminals are beyond the reach of rehabilitation. It's a position supported by attorney at law John Clark.
Sometimes the lure of criminal activity would mean that despite your best efforts, there are some persons who will always choose to commit crime. And to answer the question, I do agree 100% with the minister. I believe science would back that up, that there are some persons who no societal intervention can assist them to choose a life free from crime.
Councillor for the Papine Division, Venetia Phillips, has a different view. Ms. Phillips says increased community policing can also help with the integration process when criminals are no longer behind bars.
All these are factors that must be at play if we are to succeed at all with those who have the capacity and demonstrate the will to be reintegrated and re-socialized. So we have to make that distinction systemically as to those who are given to a life of crime so that we don't waste powder upon blackboard, as your grandparents would say. But those who will be rehabilitated, that process also takes place outside of prison walls. And how do we then approach them?
In the meantime, former Police Commissioner Owen Ellington says the country will begin to see a massive reduction in crime if the focus is placed on dismantling gang-related activities.
Any community that can have itself rid of gangs tomorrow will begin to see a brighter future. So what we need to focus our minds on a little bit is the gangs, these groups of social actors, what they are, what they do in communities, what they do to the communities, the social cost, the economic cost of gang presence in communities. No amount of resources pumped into them, no amount of social intervention is going to make a difference unless the gangs are removed.
They were speaking on the morning agenda on Power 106. Herman Green, TVJ News.
And it's now time for the Business Minute with O'Shane Masters.
The Tourism Ministry is reporting that 260,000 travelers have booked flights to Jamaica from Canada. Tourism Minister Ed Bartlett says the figure is 65% of airlift bookings for the corresponding period in 2019, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Canada will deliver 50 non-stop flights per week to the island commencing November 1. The flights will be operated by Air Canada, WestJet, Sunwing, Swoop, and Transat, with direct services from the Canadian cities of Toronto, Montreal, Calgary, Winnipeg, Hamilton, Halifax, Edmonton, St. John's, Ottawa, and Moncton.
The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, is reporting that global debt increased substantially in 2020. Speaking at a news briefing recently, Director of the IMF's Fiscal Monitor Department, Vitor Gaspar, said the figure was the highest on record.
The debt of governments, households, and non-financial corporations added up to $256 trillion in 2020. That's 27 trillion above 2019. This increase is by far the largest on record. Advanced economies and China contributed more than 90% to the accumulation of worldwide debt in 2020. The remaining emerging markets and low-income developing countries contributed only around 7%. Constraints on financing are particularly severe for poorer countries.
He said while the increased borrowing and spending were justified due to the need for strategies to combat the pandemic, critical steps must be taken to minimize this debt, especially for smaller states. And that's it for the Business Minute for this week.
We go now to Sandy Williams with the top regional and international stories.
In the region, the Tourist Association of Haiti, ATH, has condemned the murder of well-known sculptor Anderson Bellamy by armed gangmen. The ATH said it is disturbed by the passiveness of the government towards the escalation of criminal activity in the French-speaking country and is calling for strong and immediate actions against gangs, which, according to ATH, seem to replace the state in the management of the life of the country. Bellamy was killed at his residence that media reports described as one of the oldest voodoo shrines and family heritage in the village of Noailles, with paintings, in particular murals from the 50s. On the international scene, the Conservative MP Sir David Emmes has succumbed to his injuries after he was stabbed multiple times while holding a constituency surgery. The veteran MP, who has represented South End West in Essex since 1983, was attacked at Belfair's Methodist Church in Leigh-on-Sea. Staff at Emmes's office said they did not know any further details and were awaiting updates. In a brief statement, Essex police said a man had been arrested following an incident in Leigh-on-Sea. A Sky News report said a man walked into the constituency surgery and stabbed the MP a number of times. Emmes was being treated at the scene. And that's the top regional and international stories. I'm Sandy Williams.
We now head to a quick break. When we come back, Simon Preston will have the Midday Sports.
Welcome back. It's now time for Midday Sports. I'm Simon Preston. 5 under-21 players have been selected in Jamaica's squad for the Rugby America's North Sevens Championship in the Turks and Caicos Islands this weekend. Cameron Melville, Chris McIntosh, Jack Rampton, Matthew Core and Ollie Melville are the youth players in the squad. The rest of the team reads Captain O'Shane Eddy, Vice-Captain Lucas Roy Smith, Gareth Stapani, Mark Phillips, Mason Catton-Brown, Michael Sinclair and Orlando Mesado. Captain Eddy says he's happy to see new faces added to the pool ahead of the World Cup qualifiers next year.
brilliant talent coming in. We were building from the ground up, preparing for some major tournaments coming up next year. We have a couple good young talents coming up, proper age, can last us a decade or so. So we're just here to build on that, show off our new talents, give them a good opportunity to endorse themselves, and just to come off this weekend feeling confident and proud to play for Jamaica.
The Crocs will face the Turks and Caicos Islands and the British Virgin Islands on the opening day. The top two teams in each group will advance to the quarterfinals of the competition. Jamaica will be searching for their fourth hold of the title. The winner will qualify for the World Rugby Sevens Challenger Series next year. To football we go now, as 3 reggae boys have been named in the SofaScore Team of the Week for the October window of the CONCACAF World Cup qualifiers. SofaScore is one of the leading analytical football databases in the world, which provides in-depth statistics on players. Captain Andre Blake is in the 11 alongside Damian Lowe and Javon Watson. The team also has 3 Americans in Timothy Weah, Serginho Dest and Yunus Musa. Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David are the Canadians in the team, while the rest of the squad reads Hector Moreno and Jesus Corona of Mexico and Celso Borges of Costa Rica. The Reggae Boys are 6th in the octagon on 5 points. And finally this afternoon, the Chennai Super Kings posted 192 for 3 off their 20 overs against the Calcutta Knight Riders in the final of the Indian Premier League in Dubai. Faf du Plessis top scored for CSK with 86, while Moeen Ali chipped in with 37. West Indian Sunil Narayan took 2 for 26 for KKR. At sports time, KKR had reached 99 for 3 after 12 overs. The Super Kings are searching for their 4th title, while the Knight Riders are hoping to claim their 3rd crown. The Mumbai Indians are the most successful team in the history of the IPL with 5 titles. That is where we'll pull up stumps for now. For your midday sports report, I'm Simon Preston. Giovanni, it is over to you.
And that is also where we leave the field of play for the midday news. I'm Giovanni Dennis. Join us at 7 for primetime news. On behalf of the news, sports and production teams, have a good afternoon.